Welcome to Soul of Travel. I am really happy today to be bringing Dr. Nick Ellis and Matt Kinch from MEDLIFE Movement, MEDLIFE, and Good Life Expeditions. I have had the pleasure of kind of connecting with them off and on throughout my beginnings of Lotus Sojourns because I decided I wanted to launch with a trip to Peru. And after researching operators that had aligned values with mine concerning sustainability and supporting community-based tourism, as well as kind of getting off the beaten path and creating unique travel, I happened to find Good Life Expeditions and then learned more about how their company actually supports MedLife. And that got me really excited in terms of amplifying what travel can do. And when I launched Soul of Travel last year, season one was really focusing on tourism rising and what tourism was going to look like from the beginning of the pandemic moving forward. And now we're a little over a year later, so we've had an opportunity to see what really did unfold in that space and time. And I'm really grateful that we finally found the time to bring this conversation. It's also been aligned with Lotus Communities, which is a brand that I launched during this last year as well, to kind of create connection and support communities that I wasn't able to travel to in the absence of travel. And I'm really grateful to have been able to partner with both of you in that effort and support the work that you're doing right now. So one, just welcome to Soul of Travel. I'm so glad to have you both here. And to start our conversation, I'm going to just turn it over to Nick first to talk a little bit about kind of how travel found you and how you made your way to Peru. And we'll just start walking through our journeys that way.
Great. Well, thank you for having us. So my path to travel was a little bit roundabout. It did have sort of a traditional start, I would say. When I was in high school, I had the opportunity to go to Europe, and I come from a relatively small town in Maine. And so I got this opportunity as a, teenager to go see all these different countries. And that really fascinated me. My second trip was going back to Europe. And so the first time I went on a very organized trip. The second time I went with just a group of friends, and we just backpacked and took buses and everything. And eventually that led me going to college in Montreal and being very excited about the idea of travel and something kind of this experience that I had internationally, but not necessarily being able to put it into like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And that led to a degree in international development, which led to me spending a lot of time in Latin America. I did some studies in Panama and Ecuador. And then eventually I did an internship with a Boston-based nonprofit in Peru. And so I was based in Lima, and I had been doing a lot of kind of global health-based work. At that time, met who would become my wife, Angie. And that is kind of what really started. At that time, we started MedLife. So MedLife was started around 2004. And for all of your listeners, MedLife is essentially an organization that kind of looked at the medical mission model and wasn't real satisfied and created something else. And so grew to a kind of pre-pandemic peak around 3,000 travelers a year or so. So as I went on to medical school, my wife and I kind of continued to collaborate, and we grew that. And Lima ended up being our base. And then in 2016, I moved back to Lima full time. And we've been running the organization there since. When COVID hit, I came back to the United States because I am an ER doctor in addition to my work with MedLife and Good Life. So I've been in Maine for the last year or so, off and on. I work in Texas, and so I bounce around a little bit. But that's essentially kind of how I got into it initially.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's always just interesting to see how we walk into these kind of unusual or these paths that a lot of people don't seem to find. And I love seeing how they are really become really clear once you get further down, but in the middle, all these things kind of keep happening. And you're like, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden it just like becomes the next right thing. So thank you for sharing that. Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, a few similarities with Nick. Specifically, we both kind of call Lima home, as well as I'm Canadian, so I also spend part of my time here in Canada. Really kind of didn't see travel as a path early growing up. I think similar to Nick, coming from a very rural place, I just happened to kind of get into tourism and study tourism in college, more so because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And very luckily, one of my professors directed me to a company that does work in Latin America. And so I started working there, very much what a kind of tourism student would do, kind of going into the entry level ranks, working in a call center, booking travel for people. And I think the one unique thing was I was booking travel to places like Peru and Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands, having never been there myself, and just being very interested in it. And kind of as I went into that organization, everyone around me had been to all of these amazing places. And so very quickly, working in the head office wasn't going to be enough. And so I started traveling to the remote offices in Latin America, and I was lucky enough to be transferred to work there. And working alongside expats and people speaking multiple languages, and really kind of integrating into the culture was something that just immediately attracted me. And it's funny, Nick and I were talking even just yesterday a little bit about this and how travel has impacted us. And I think for both of us, it really changed our trajectory and where our life was going, right? I met my wife in Lima. We've been married 10 years now. Just moved back to Canada after living 10 years in South America and spending time working in multiple countries. Ecuador, we spent a lot of time there working in the Galapagos Islands and out of Quito, and just kind of moving around and growing in our careers together. And then I just happened across Nick a couple of years ago, and we talked and stayed in contact. And then, Nick was very astute in identifying that I was very interested in, doing part of my work in Peru and part of my work in Canada. And, that's kind of what we're doing now, and it's working out very well. But I've always been most interested in things like community tourism, working with vulnerable and indigenous communities, and finding more sustainable ways to where they get a benefit from travel, and not just being kind of forgotten. And so that, I think we all agree here, that that's one of the richest parts of travel, when you really get to go a few layers deeper with different communities and work with them. And then, the work MedLife was doing was instantly impressive and attractive. And so been going strong ever since. And, as soon as borders open and things improve a little bit, look forward to getting back to Lima quite soon.
Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking about how many people get into travel and find themselves in that position where you are just booking travel for others, and you're like, wait a second, that's not exactly what I thought I was doing. And then it leads you to kind of get out there and actually start traveling. And then the ways that for people who have been in the space of travel for such a long time, that the travels themselves kind of become the roadmap of your life, and you can just kind of pin like, oh, this is what this journey gave me, and this is what this trip gave me, and it's really becomes a part of your story. And then the other part that I love, especially in these conversations, is showing the other, and kind of like you said, the depth of travel, that it's not always just about escape, and it's not always about a vacation, but it can really be about uncovering the stories of the places that you are, and really connecting to the people and creating a richer understanding and taking it to that next level. And then that allows for people who have interests in philanthropic work and community-based tourism and international development, then all of those things kind of naturally start to find their way into the space of travel. And I just always think that's so interesting because most of the people I speak to, like they do travel, but they also do 50 other things that happen to be aligned with travel being this vehicle to create all of those other experiences. Um, and that was really part of my draw to MedLife, is knowing that in that connection and that support of travel, that it was doing something else. And I would like to kind of get a better understanding. I know, Nick, you mentioned when MedLife began, but what was kind of the precipice for that, or what need did you see that you wanted to kind of step up and fill with that program?
Yeah. So I think, of course, we have poverty in the United States and North America. It's, I think everybody would agree, it's just a little bit less shocking than the poverty you might see in Latin America. And that was very much the reality for me. And so as I started working in Latin America, I certainly didn't start out thinking I'm going to be a doctor or start a nonprofit or something. But it was really just that stark level of inequality that really struck me. I remember living in Panama and going to the bus station every day to catch the bus to a different part of town where I was doing an internship. And I would cross this guy that had this old kind of wound on his leg. And I just thought to myself, eventually, I had never experienced someone being sick every single day and not ever getting better, right? And not being able to go to a doctor and see somebody. And so that was one of the first experiences that I had sort of with medicine and sick people, and sort of thinking to myself, that's not right. Like at home, if somebody was sick like that, they would go to the hospital and they would get treatment. And I just saw this guy every day, again and again and again. And I think, we all, Matt and I were talking about this, and I think you just touched on this too. As you begin to travel, I think when you start out traveling, it's all about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, learning about other cultures. And as you go, you kind of, there's this natural process as you're seeing these other realities that you start to internalize things, and you start to kind of question yourself. And, am I seeing this the right way, or how do I see this, or what kind of assumptions am I bringing to the table? And I think that as I sort of started to process that, that process for me led to action, which I think for many of us it does. And so I started to feel like I really need to have some tools in this game that I can somehow affect the outcome. And I was sort of a math science kid, and so medicine seemed like a natural place. And so I was never, that pre-med kid in college. It was literally in the last months of college that I decided I would go to medical school. But it was all informed by living in Latin America. And so the more that I got involved in that and kind of being involved in healthcare in Latin America, I was actually volunteering at a hospital with an orthopedic surgeon randomly through a connection that I had, an Ecuadorian surgeon in Riobamba, Ecuador. And somehow, I honestly can't remember how this happened, but a group of North American doctors came through on a medical mission into Riobamba, and they asked me if I was willing to translate because I'd been living in Ecuador and Latin America for a while. And so I said, sure, I'm happy to translate. And so I kind of went and I saw the process of a medical mission, which, for anybody that's not familiar with that, the short version is, a doctor from North America or Europe coming down for about 5 days and providing free care. And there was just some things, again, as you kind of watched and you observed this, that kind of struck you very quickly. If somebody thought that a patient maybe had cancer, there was no really way to figure that out. There were no blood tests. There were no tests. It was just sort of, you were in this very rural community and people just kind of threw their hands up and said, well, that's really unfortunate. And then if somebody did know that they were sick, there was no real way to kind of affect any change. There was no follow-up or anything. And I thought to myself, geez, there's got to be a better way to do that. And so kind of fast forward where we are today, essentially what MedLife does is that same sort of model where we bring people down and provide the experiences that they're looking for to learn about culture, but also feel like they can kind of play in that, making a change too, and kind of flex that muscle of action within themselves a little bit. But we do that through partnering with local physicians who speak the local language, who understand the local culture. We employ local nurses so that if we do diagnose somebody or we need to do a better diagnosis, we can get blood work. We partner with the local healthcare system. So we're not creating redundant systems. We're working within the system, and the natural gaps that exist within that system, we're bridging through fundraising. And really, so we've created this model where a group of students can come down and volunteer for a week, but we might diagnose someone with cancer, and we may then treat them with the local system over the next 2 years, And so we've really been able to capitalize on sort of short-term bursts of kind of energy, work, and financial resources, and stretch that into a long-term intervention in communities. And that's really how MedLife was born.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think it kind of like you said, until you're in the middle of it and kind of watching and even having to be traveling somewhere for a while, you don't begin to understand how all of those pieces fit together. And you have the first reaction of I need to do something, but it takes a while to sit to really understand what the need is and to have that become more directed by the community and not just go in with your own assumptions of what needs to be fixed, but letting it evolve more organically. And I love seeing that, because I think that then has a more sustainable impact versus, like you said, kind of this short-term quick fix and almost something that feels better because you're doing something, but you're not really connected to the long-term outcome. So I think that that's so important to see that that's kind of the shift in the model of the work that you do. Matt, did you have anything that you wanted to add with how you've been?
Yeah, I mean, just the model itself, the sustainability that comes with something like this is really quite incredible, because tourism becomes the engine. The students and volunteers coming down on a regular basis is really what ensures that we can continue and provide the follow-up care. And so that's really been something remarkable to see. I think all of us in the kind of tourism space, when we hear about volunteering, a little bit skeptical of this. And it's working with Nick and seeing the work that MedLife has been doing all these years, it really changes that perspective, that you can't just kind of make a blanket statement that all volunteering is kind of negative and not sustainable, because the students coming in on a regular basis are providing the clinics for us on a regular basis, but then also allow us to keep on doing follow-up work, because we know every 3 or 4 months we're having large groups and clinics to plan. And so it's also for the communities. They know that it's not just visiting us this one time in this year. They know 3 months from now there's going to be another clinic, and another 3 months from now there's going to be another one. And so in all of that time, MedLife's able to really make some amazing partnerships with communities and plan and kind of spend that time in the background communicating to them, talking to them, understanding the needs. And so we use that tourism to kind of just push the next initiative or the next thing that the community has in terms of what the community needs. We're able to really facilitate that using tourism.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this is a really unique way of traveling and partnering. What does this type of travel offer to the travelers that are coming down, and what does the connection and kind of the consistent community building offer to the communities? I feel like that's really important to how this works.
Yeah. So I think the great thing about this and the models that we've created at this point, and you mentioned earlier Good Life Expeditions. For your listeners, Good Life Expeditions is an organization that's just travel. And so it supports MedLife and the work that we do, but it doesn't mean that somebody has to necessarily go into some of the informal human settlements when they come down. And that's really our approach. Our approach is kind of, how can we offer an opportunity for someone to get involved in this? as I mentioned, some of my first exposure to travel was in Europe. I mean, it had nothing to do with inequality or anything like that, right? And so we totally recognize that everybody in their lives are at different places, and what they need at that time is different. And so sometimes what you need is a vacation. And so you're going to Peru just for that vacation. And if we can help facilitate that and, you know, help you learn about another culture and see something exciting and fill something in yourself and provide you with a little bit of time, you know, for reflection, we're all about that. And, you know, both Matt and I feel like that's really important in your life. If you're at a place that's different than that, you kind of want to flex that action muscle and kind of make some changes. We're also very capable of doing that and can really take you into the thick of it, into, you know, very informal human settlements. And, you know, in other terms, you might say slum. In Spanish, they say informal human settlements. And so we've just sort of adopted that language. And so really for people coming down to visit us, kind of the full scope of travel versus volunteering is possible, and all of it ultimately helps. What that provides us in terms of communities is really far reaching. You know, as I mentioned, we've had people that we've treated for cancer, literally over a couple of years. There have been patients that we've been, for most of their lives, been involved in their care. There's a young boy that I met let's see, this was probably 2004, 2005. I think we got him heart surgery in 2005, and we've connected with him ever since. And so periodically we'll check in on him, right? And so we have this really kind of longitudinal connection with communities and individuals. On the community side, Matt sort of spoke to our ability to really understand some of the deeper rooted issues. And so things like access to water, access to sewage. One of the biggest issues that we face is access to land title, because land title in a lot of Latin America is sort of a prerequisite before you can get electricity, water, sewage, you know, a lot of different services. And so we've been very involved with everybody from politics to local NGOs to community-based organizations, trying to figure out how best to address that issue. And in that process, I think, you know, what you said about just kind of tackling the next problem really resonated with me. I mean, you have a problem in front of you and you're sort of there. So in this process of learning, you know, we've done a lot of different things: educational workshops, women's health clinics, nutrition-based stuff. In this last year, because of the relationships that we have in the different communities where we work, very early on when COVID hit and the pandemic started and countries started to kind of clamp down and go into lockdown, we started getting text messages from people about the need for food. Nutrition support is not something that we had been intimately involved in for the 15 years prior. But all of a sudden, it was very clear to us that it was going to be a very big issue. And so very quickly, we launched a new campaign to provide 1 million meals to people. And so it's that kind of thing that the tourism, as Matt said, is sort of an engine that facilitates this really deep connection to individuals and communities living in these situations, where it's really not just a relationship. I mean, friendship grows out of that, you know? And I think for any of us, if you were in that sort of situation and you saw friends, you know, not being able to eat, we would all be sparked to action. And so Matt and I did and worked really hard to do this campaign, and very soon we'll cross that 1 million meal mark, you know. And so really the impact for communities, I think, is the way that I think about it is it's really empowering the communities to make their own impact, right? We're not the ones that decided that they needed food, and we're not the ones really that even organized the meals being cooked and things. We're just facilitating that process through some financial resources and support logistically, you know. And I think that's, to me, the exciting thing is these people are in full mode of going forward and making their lives better, and we're just really a partner in that process. So when they're hitting bumps or need a little bit of support overcoming some obstacles, we're there to help that.
Yeah. I think that I just think that is, again, kind of so unique, and I love how the need dictates the action, and kind of not vice versa, or that it's just so community led. But I was going to ask, obviously you have built this model based on tourism and travelers coming, both in providing the support with the teams coming in, but also the financial support because of travelers. So this last year, as for most of us in this space of travel, it has provided a lot of things to overcome. And you did just kind of mention the 1 million meals campaign, but I would really love to spend a little bit more time on talking about what that has looked like. And I know that in previous conversations that we've had, seeing the roles of leadership being developed in the communities. You mentioned that you weren't really the ones in charge of preparing the meals and distributing the meals, that you really were just behind the scenes with financial support, but that you have been really inspired by, surprised by how some of that has evolved throughout this year. And I would love to just talk a little bit more about what that experience has been like and what you've seen in these communities as they've navigated this.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I think, like any other travel organization or organization that depends on revenue from travel, we were certainly in kind of crisis mode and planning and trying to figure it out like everyone else. Very, very early on, something very special happened, which was one of our chapters or universities that had been on a trip with us volunteering. They had actually sent us, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000 from a fundraiser that they just put on. And, this was something I remember we all just kind of were like, what happened here? Because it wasn't planned. It was something done completely by this student group. And it really speaks to the connection that gets created and the relationship that anyone that comes and experiences. That it's one of those things, it's an ongoing commitment to helping and improving the lives of these communities. And so very quickly, our community of travelers and volunteers, people who had been on MedLife trips in the past or were planning them, you can imagine when everyone was talking about refunds and travel credits, we had those issues as well. We had people who had travel booked for the future. The conversation was almost nothing to do with travel credits and vouchers. It was more of that empathy and understanding that the community that MedLife serves are in trouble. And so very quickly, it was our community that just kind of leaned in and showed their support. And then we just had to figure out as a team how to help them rally around it. And so we then did a series of over 250 fundraisers over, in the first few months of the pandemic. And it very quickly became obvious, like, we're not only going to be able to provide like immediate meals right now, but this is going to be an ongoing thing. And we're going to be able to open this up and do this in more communities. And so, in the beginning, it was food bags and parcels and deliveries and those kind of things. And then we started seeing a lot of these communities, would work together and cook for each other, whatever food everyone had in the house. They would kind of share as a group. It's called an olla común, or like a common pot. And we basically, facilitated that model and providing the food, and the communities and the leaders there knew what to do, knew how to cook. They were already doing those things. And so, we just came in and were able to provide that support. So kind of on both sides, the model was almost created for us by our communities on the ground. They knew how to kind of take care of each other, and our high school university partners, they had that experience and wanted to help at this time. And so it really took off twofold. And Nick, I don't know if I'm forgetting anything in all of that, but I think, we have also been really surprised by how everyone has just rallied around this. And, we would have never expected to be here talking about this, at the beginning of the pandemic. It's kind of surreal every time we do talk about it. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think that does speak to the power of connection when you travel, like you were saying. I mean, if you really are having authentic connection, that for me, that's why you do it, is because it changes the context of another location in your mind and how you are connected to it. And you really can't walk away. Like you said, it's just it's an ongoing connection, an ongoing commitment, and it takes away the ability to kind of compartmentalize like that being someone else's problem. It isn't. It becomes really a connected humanity and a shared existence. And I think that's why travel is so important in general, but specifically where you spend the time getting to know people in the places that you travel and become invested in one another's lives. When
I would just add to that. I mean, I think you're totally hitting on something that resonates with Matt and I. That you kind of feel this ongoing commitment, but the other side of that same coin is kind of an ongoing gift, where those relationships become friendships, and in Matt and I's case, become wives and children and in-laws, and so it is a commitment, but it's also something that just gives to your life and adds a richness that you didn't anticipate ever having previous to having that connection, and I think that's really the true basis of that commitment, or a feeling like you need to take action, is because you have a connection that's just so strong with friends and loved ones that you develop while traveling, that when things do happen, you're just moved to action very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a touch point that you connect to right away, and it really brings you into the unfolding of that story, and really wanting to be a part of it in an authentic way, like not in just this kind of self-serving, but in a way that it's just really necessary. I know that another thing that kind of occurred throughout this journey is wanting to continue to create connection between your travelers, students, communities, and connection with the people in Peru. And you started kind of dabbling in these virtual experiences to create that connection. And also for people listening, allowing to bring guides back into work and other people who had been missing income because of the lack of tourism, a really unique opportunity to kind of expand work for them as well. And I would just love to kind of talk about what that has looked like and how that's grown and what that has offered this community as well.
I'll try and take the first stab at it. I mean, talking about virtual programs again seemed very unlikely, and when especially we're talking about students, right? So students were basically 100% virtual over this past year. Most of the universities and high schools, everyone was doing things from home, and so we knew we could do virtual experiences. We had the staff and people on the ground to facilitate this, but the question again was, how are we going to get students, spending days and days in virtual classes to then want to pay to participate in a virtual program? And I mean, it just goes back to like that. It's a way to help our community. Knew that simply by participating in this, it was supporting the communities, but it was also a way to kind of get closer to the work that they were doing. They had been fundraising for us, and again, it's kind of like one thing affects the other. And so students did such an amazing job with fundraising, but in the virtual programs, they got to see live in real time how these soup kitchens were working, talk to the people involved in it, and just it's been amazing. It's been really overwhelming, the amount of praise and support we've been getting. We're almost at 700 participants since we started, which is crazy. Like May, every day this week we have programs going on. So right now we probably have a group of 30 students in a program with our team. And then the other interesting thing was, as we're doing this, and it's one thing to do a program for a few people, but as we get 30, 40 students, we start getting into like travel logistics issues again, like how many students are going to go here, and we didn't just want to make it one big room and everyone stares at the screen, so you have to figure out breakout rooms and all of this. So like, we're going to call the trip leaders back. Like, we know that they're out of work because they're not doing this, and so we were able to call some of the trip leaders and people in tourism that are do this in person every time that they're running a trip, and now they're running programs virtually, and we're able to pay them because of the amount of students we have. And I mean, to me, that's been a real gift, just for us to be able to do that. I think for a lot of us, it's hard looking at people who worked in the front lines in tourism, being out of work, guides and trip leaders and anything related to community tourism. So many travel companies benefit by the experiences that these people give them, and yet through no real intention of anyone, they've been kind of forgotten in all of this. And so many of them, you're just kind of wondering, what are they doing at this point in time? Like, they're really waiting for tourism to come back, and it's 6 months ago, you realize this is far from coming back. And so it's been amazing to know that MedLife can serve communities, engage our students, also help our trip leaders and people affected by the drop in tourism. And so it's been something really special to see.
Thank you.
One thing I would add on to that we didn't really anticipate when we started to develop the virtual programs is they've become sort of a precursor to travel for us. And we didn't really think of it in that term or that way when we were starting to develop the programs, but it's become very clear that as people, clearly a virtual program has a much smaller price point than actual travel. The time commitment, could even be over a weekend. We've played with week-long experiences versus just a couple of afternoons in a weekend. And what we found is that more and more people, as they participate in this, are saying they really want to come back and actually travel with us in the future and participate in some of the programs that we have. And so, which is always great, right? When you have a product that in itself is doing good work, but then it also is a precursor to somebody staying involved with your organization and kind of continuing to grow in that way. I mean, that's just great, right? It's ideal. And so it's sort of, I would say, positioned us fairly well that once travel is coming back, and, of course, we're anticipating Christmas time or so for our group of or our community of students, that's when it's really going to start pretty heavily. We're kind of priming them already, right? They're already really excited. They're getting a taste of seeing some of those experiences on the ground and saying, I really want to get there. And so it's kind of serving a dual purpose for us.
Yeah, I love that. It's just deepening the community connection before you even get there. So you are already invested. And also, a lot of people have apprehension in setting off to somewhere like Peru to travel, and setting off when you know that you're going to be engaging in work that maybe you believe in, but is going to provide you some level of discomfort because you're unsure, that it's going to be a challenging mental space to be in. But if you kind of overcome some of those hurdles from the safety of your own home, then you're like you said, you're almost more ready to go than you would have been without this virtual experience. So I love seeing how this isn't something that you're doing maybe just to fill the gap, but it will actually be something you can incorporate into your model moving forward.
I think it opens up amazing possibilities going forward. And to your point, if we had a university club that didn't travel one year, they just didn't travel. And so to know that we can introduce these kind of programs to just kind of get people's feet wet to what an experience on the ground might be like, it creates a whole new link and an opportunity for us, and you know, especially in the educational sector, of how we can basically create virtual field trips. It's really exciting now to see where we can take this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is you can really expand beyond the high school and university students, is being able to even reach younger audiences, helping them to understand what it's like to be a global citizen from a really early age. And you're just cultivating that mindset from the gate, which I think for us that have had that opportunity to have those experiences, that's really what we wish. Like it's not about, I think I hear this over and over, it's not about us really wanting to have a travel business because that was always our dream, but it's this wish that other people just get to have the experiences we've had and feel that connection to a larger global community. Well, as we start to wrap up this conversation, I just want to invite either of you, if there's anything else that you want to share about the work that you're doing right now. I would love to create the space for that, as well as letting any of our listeners know how they can get involved, how they can join a virtual experience, where to follow you to learn about trips in the future, and all of those things.
Yeah, I guess the thing that we're looking forward is kind of how do we scale this? You know, we do some really great work, and we feel very confident that we can do even more great work, right? And so we are developing a new business development team to open up to new chapters, universities, and things. And something that I think Matt sort of alluded to earlier is that we haven't really dived into, but we've talked a lot about, is Good Life Expeditions. And so Good Life Expeditions is our just straight travel agency. It's people want to come down and go to Torres del Paine and, you know, in Chile and Patagonia, or if they want to go to Machu Picchu, we have the ability to book that. And really what we're talking about is kind of collaborations with people like yourself, and really being able to provide products to your community that provide that really deep, authentic connection to some of the communities that we work in, but then, you know, other places as well. And so I guess what I would really encourage people to do is reach out to you. And, you know, this is a collaboration that we hope will be fruitful, and be able to, you know, provide experiences to some of your clients, but at the same time, serve the needs of some of our communities. And so kind of as you begin to develop your community and your clients and your customers, we're happy to facilitate, whether it's a afternoon virtual experience as like a precursor to really deciding if they want to do a full-on trip with you. And we're happy to really collaborate on, you know, a bigger project and actually have people come down and visit Peru. So
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my experience traveling, and as you mentioned, with through Good Life Expeditions was really great in that not only was I seeing the places I wanted to see, you so beautifully folded in these other experiences connecting with local communities that I wouldn't have known to ask for. And for instance, I ended up visiting a village on a day that they happened to have the press coming in to talk to them about a program that they were doing, where the school had been teaching the kind of lost arts of weaving and agriculture, and then they were using the money from selling both extra produce and the weavings to buy computers for their school. And so this was something that the community was really proud of. There was reporters there. They had all of it set up to kind of show the process of how they were dyeing the yarn and everything, which is an experience you can have in Peru pretty easily. But in this way, it was so unique. And for me in that moment, I was the only traveler there, which was an incredible experience. And then they asked if they could invite me to lunch. So I shared with them in this lunch, and it was this beautiful day that, you know, maybe doesn't always happen, but I think is more inclined to happen when you're working with someone that is really tied to communities, that knows about these kind of unique experiences, allowed me to support a community and a village that probably doesn't usually get travelers. And so my tourism dollars were more impactful. And I think that happened across the board on that trip. I mean, I think I saw 2 other travelers the whole entire time I was in that area of Peru. I felt like I had like a hold and got to experience it all by myself. But it just goes to show that something really unique can be created, like you said, in a standalone tourism experience using the same kind of mindset and values that you have in creating the volunteer expeditions as well. Yeah, so I really hope that to be able to do that soon. I mean, I continually speak about the beauty of that experience, and people are just kind of like chomping at the bit to get to go there and see what is there and to return to Peru. And every time you guys mention Lima, there's a little tug at my heart as well, because like you said, it gets under your skin when you travel and you do develop those connections, and it's just something that is exciting to be able to share.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, obviously this has been just such a roller coaster this past year, but really, I would say in the last month or two, Matt and I, are constantly in touch with, lots of different people in this industry, and we're feeling very confident that tourism is coming back real soon. And I travel every month as an ER doctor, and I'll tell you, 2 or 3 months ago, airports were pretty stark. There wasn't a lot of travelers, and in the last 2 months, it really feels very much like pre-COVID times. And so I think, that certainly in our industry, countries like Peru are going to be a little bit behind the curve in terms of getting their vaccinations, and there's going to be some logistics that need to be worked out with that. But even that's starting to move pretty quickly now too. So we think we're really there, and are really encouraging people to start booking travel now, because oftentimes it's 6 or 8 months before people are really thinking of traveling, and we think 6 or 8 months from now people will be back and traveling. So I think we're pretty much there, really. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask when you did foresee travel returning to Peru, and I have 2 friends that happen to be there now, and they're traveling really in remote areas and just kind of backpacking and doing some community-based work with artisans that they partner with, and seeing the pictures, it's very exciting to think about the possibility of returning to that. So I agree. I think that people are really starting to push in that direction, and that the country will hopefully be ready to welcome those travelers soon. Just to end, where can people find you? I mean, I think that you have social media and websites and everything, but if they want to connect, or if it's a university group or someone who would want to work with you in that capacity, what would that look like for them?
Easiest place to find us is our website, medlifemovement.org. As we kind of touched on earlier in our conversation, we're approaching our 1 millionth meal served, and so in addition, just always welcoming any donations or support from your listeners. You'll be able to donate from our website. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, but our website is probably the best place to find us.
Excellent. Yeah, and we did partner kind of at the beginning of this year. I feel like my timeline, I always need to have one in front of me, because I have no idea when anything has happened since a year ago, but with Lotus Communities. And so some of those are still available also on my website if people want to support that way. $10 from every community is going to this effort, and I'm going to be wrapping up that drive soon. So if people are interested, they can visit the Lotus Sojourns website and see the Lotus communities that are available. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we've been trying to make this conversation happen for a while, and you guys have been so busy and doing all of the things that you've been working in, but I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to have been able to share more about MedLife with my listeners.
Thanks to you, Christine.